welcome to the Shakespeare podcast. Today we'll be looking at the story of the Merchant of Venice. So the Merchant of Venice begins in a street scene in Venice. Venice as an exciting and cosmopolitan city where people from all nationalities, races and religions come to trade with the exotic East and make or lose a fortune trading spices and silk. Antonio is sad, which in Elizabethan terms means serious or solemn rather than miserable, which is unusual because Venice is such a party town where everybody's so busy. It's not like Elizabethan London at all. And his friends Solarino and Solario are sympathetic with him. Of course he's sad because all his ships are at sea and they could be blown off course or hit a sandbank or some rocks. And if your ships got sunk, all those expensive spices become worthless, and all your fine silks, quote, enrobe the roaring waters and are worth nothing, as it says in line 35. No, says Antonio, that's not the problem. Well, maybe it's a woman then. No, it's not that either. We don't actually find out why Antonio is so sad, because life's so fast moving in Venice that Bassanio, Lorenzo and Gratiano arrive and Salarino and Salerno have to leave, and then Gratiano and Lorenzo have to leave because they've all got important business and they're all going to meet up later at dinner time. It's so exciting what goes on in Venice, and it isn't until Bassanio and Antonio are left alone that we hear about Portia and how Bassanio fancies his chances with winning her hand in marriage, and Antonio agrees to help him. That's scene 1. Scene 2, boom. We're straight into Portia's house with her lady-in-waiting Nerissa. So I want you to think of this like the Victoria Beckham documentary for Netflix. This is the Elizabethan version, and we're going behind the scenes for exclusive footage of Portia in her bedroom having her hair brushed by her maid Nerissa before the big casket scene with the Prince of Morocco. What are Portia and Nerissa talking about? Why, they're talking about men, and in particular some of the men who have come to Belmont to try to win Portia's hand in marriage. OMG, says Portia, men are so stupid. The Neapolitan guy, by the way, the Neapolitans were famous for their horsemanship, the Neapolitan guy never stopped talking about his horse. The Palatine guy was too serious. The French guy never stopped bragging. The English guy couldn't speak any different languages. He looked pretty, but, quote, who can converse with the dumb show? And he dressed weird. The Scottish guy kept arguing with the English guy. The German guy was terrible when he's sober and awful when he's drunk. These guys are so bad, I'd rather be a virgin than marry any of them, says Portia. Nerissa at this point reminds Portia of Bassanio, and Portia admits that he's not bad as men go. And a messenger arrives to tell us that 4 of the men who've tried to win her hand in marriage are now leaving, and that a new guy has turned up, the Prince of Morocco. Well, says Portia, he can't be any worse than the last lot. In scene 3, we're back on the busy streets of Venice, and Bassanio is talking to Shylock about borrowing money, 3,000 ducats over 3 months. And Antonio will act as the bond for the debt. In other words, if Bassanio can't pay it, Antonio will make good on the debt. Shylock is immediately interested in Antonio as bond and gives a detailed account of Antonio's financial position. Bassanio invites Shylock to dinner, but Shylock turns him down on the grounds that Bassanio is a Christian and tells him to his face, I will buy with you, sell with you, but I will not eat with you nor pray with you. Antonio turns up and Shylock immediately tells us, quote, I hate him for he is a Christian. Shylock also tells us that Antonio lends out money without interest, which destroys Shylock's business, and he makes fun of Shylock to the other merchants. quote, my bargains and my well-won thrift. Then Shylock pretends that he hasn't seen Antonio, and they proceed to go over the details of the deal, which soon descends into an argument about charging interest and the nature of Holy Scripture. Antonio grows impatient and says, do we have a deal? But Shylock says, quote, you spit on me and insult me, and now you want to borrow money from me. What should I say to you? Asks Shylock. Antonio says he'll still hate Shylock whether he lends him the money or not, and Shylock says, in that case, I'll lend you the money, and if you don't repay it, I get a pound of your flesh. Bassanio immediately says, don't be bothered with this deal, I don't need the money that bad. And Shylock says, this isn't lending money at interest, the pound of flesh, after all, isn't worth anything, I'm just being friendly. He also says that he's offering him the deal in the form of friendship. But he also says it's this deal or nothing. And that if Antonio doesn't take the deal, it'll be an insult to Shylock. Antonio accepts the deal and they make arrangements to sort it out. Bassanio says he doesn't like the terms of the deal, and Antonio says, relax, I'll be able to pay him back a month before the jet is actually due. Now, at this point, scholars disagree on what's actually happened here. The disagreement is, why does Antonio take the deal in the first place? Is it because Shylock fools Antonio into thinking that it's a good deal? But Antonio's already said that he doesn't like Shylock and he won't be friends with him whether Shylock lends him the money or not. And we know that Antonio has insulted Shylock on the Rialto already, so he wouldn't mind insulting him again by turning down this deal. This argument assumes that Shylock's it's the deal or nothing argument is what causes Antonio to accept the deal. Alternatively, is it because Antonio's pride has been hurt by Shylock saying, you used to insult me, but now you want to borrow money off me? Oh, how the mighty are fallen. In this interpretation, Antonio enters into the deal because his pride has been hurt, and he doesn't want Shylock to win. He doesn't want Shylock to prove him right that Antonio is too high and mighty to borrow money from a Jew. And all of this is important because the rest of the story of the pound of flesh must be seen through the reasoning of why Antonio accepted the deal in the first place. That's all that happens in Act 1. In Act 2, boom, we're back at Portia's house, and the Prince of Morocco is going to pick a casket to try to win Portia's hand in marriage. As I've said in another podcast, this is the Elizabethan version of The Bachelor, or Love Island, or Blind Date. The Prince of Morocco, as far as Shakespeare's audience is concerned, is super exotic. He's well educated. Notice how his speech is full of classical references. He's rich. He's a hero. He tells us that he slew the Sophie and the Persian prince. Basically, the Prince of Morocco is a perfect guy that every woman should want. So before he chooses a casket, Portia suggests that they have dinner together. And we go to the next scene. Scene 2 is a comedy routine in which Lancelot meets an old blind man looking for Shylock's house. It turns out that Gobbo, the old blind man, is Lancelot's dad. The old man tells him that his son is dead, to which the son acts surprised. Cue jokes about men who don't know who their father is. Gobbo doesn't believe Lancelot is his son, and when he does, Lancelot says he doesn't work for Shylock anymore, as Shylock never fed him properly, and he now wants to work for Bassanio, who's recently come into money. Enter Bassanio and Leonardo and followers. Bassanio is already spending the money which he borrowed from Shylock, and he hires Lancelot and tells him to go to his house and get a uniform. Bassanio is getting ready to leave Venice to try his luck with Portia. Gratiano enters and asks to go with him to Belmont. But Bassanio thinks Gratiano is a bit rough around the edges and will talk too much and won't be a right fit for this delicate diplomatic mission. But eventually he agrees and they go off together. In scene 3, Lancelot is getting his stuff to leave Shylock's house when Shylock's daughter Jessica gives him a letter to give to Lorenzo and tells him to leave before her dad arrives. And after he exits, Jessica tells us that she intends to marry Lorenzo and become a Christian. Scene 4 is Lorenzo gets Jessica's letter of Lancelot, who he gives some money to and a message for Jessica. "Speak it privately," says Lorenzo, because it's a secret. Lorenzo tells Gratiano and the audience that he has a plan to elope with Jessica, who's going to steal some of her dad's stuff, which apparently is morally fine because Shylock is a Jew. It's not morally fine, of course, and we and the audience know that it isn't. Scene 5 in Act 2 is Shylock getting ready to leave to go to Bassiano's. He tells Jessica he's going out and she needs to look after the house. Lancelot explains that it's a masked ball, and Shylock tells Jessica to lock up the house and not go out. Lancelot exits, telling her that Lorenzo is going to come for her. And Shylock says, "What did he say?" And Jessica says, "Nothing." And Shylock finally, after lots of talking, leaves, and Jessica tells us, "If this play works out, I'm going to be out of here." Scene 6, the guys are in place to help Lorenzo elope with Jessica. Enter Lorenzo, who thanks them, and then Jessica, disguised as a boy, enters. Ironically, what she's stolen from her father's house is a casket, just like the caskets that Portia's suitors have to open. Lorenzo and Jessica exit. Antonio arrives to tell us Bassanio leaves and Gratiano goes off to join him. Scene 7 is back at Portia's place. She's had dinner with the Prince of Morocco, remember him. He goes through the caskets, reading each one for our benefit, and the Prince has 50 lines of a speech before picking the wrong casket. Notice the audience also gets to know that it's the wrong casket. The Prince of Morocco chooses gold, which is wrong, and when he realises, he storms off with his followers. "Oh dear," says Portia, "he was nice." Scene 8, Salarino and Salanio, you may remember them from the very beginning of the play, recap what's happened and explain that Shylock's unhappy about Jessica eloping with Lorenzo and stealing his jewels and ducats. Antonio's ship in England has sunk in the English Channel, and they suggest that Shylock is very upset. Scene 9, in Portia's house, we get contestant number 2, the Prince of Aragon. Like Morocco, Aragon reads the messages with the caskets for the audience benefit. He picks the wrong casket, which also means that the audience now knows that the gold and silver caskets are the wrong ones, and therefore the lead one is the right one. Aragon reads the message, which says basically that he's an idiot, and he storms off. Portia says, "And none of these guys ever going to get it?" And Nerissa reminds her that they get what they deserve, as she says, "Hanging and wiving goes by destiny." Enter the messenger to tell them that Bassanio has arrived. Act 3 begins with Salario and Salanio giving us another recap on the action. Antonio's ship has gone down off the coast of England, and things might get worse for him. Enter Shylock, who accuses them of knowing about his daughter's plan to elope. And Shylock is really angry and says he'll have his revenge on Antonio. "Look to thy bond," he says. Shylock rails against the Christians and their anti-Jewish sentiments. Salario and Salarino exit. Tubal enters. Shylock complains about the stuff that his daughter took, and Tubal tells Shylock another of Antonio's ships has gone down, and Shylock is delighted. So basically at the end of this scene, Jessica is squandering Shylock's money, which he hates, but Antonio is in big trouble, which he loves. In the next scene, we're back at Portia's house. Now it's contestant number 3, Bassanio. Portia suggests that they hang out for a while before he picks a casket, but Bassanio says that he can't wait and has to pick a casket right away. There's a suggestion here that Bassanio has been tipped off about which one is the right casket, possibly by Nerissa, possibly by Portia herself. That's what we're told in the source material, that it's the lady in waiting who helps out the winning suitor. Bassanio picks the right casket. Portia's delighted because she wanted Bassanio all along anyway. Portia gives Bassanio a ring, which he agrees that if he loses it will ruin their love. Nerissa announces that she's marrying Gratiano and that their marriage was dependent upon Bassanio's success. Portia suggests Nerissa has planned it all along. Enter Jessica and Lorenzo and Salario to tell our happy couples that Antonio is undone, his ships have sunk, and Shylock wants his pound of flesh. Bassanio is off to Venice with the lads to save Antonio. In the next scene, we're in the prison, and Shylock is telling the jailer that he has no mercy for his prisoner Antonio. Shylock is sure he'll get his pound of flesh. Salario comforts Antonio by saying the Duke will never allow it, but the Duke, as Antonio points out, quote, cannot deny the course of the law. Things are looking bad for the good guys. In scene 4, Portia leaves her house and puts Lorenzo and Jessica in charge while she's away. She says she's going to a monastery, but secretly she's going to Venice with Nerissa, disguised as a lawyer. Then we have another comic routine with Lancelot, who's in Bassanio's employment now, remember. He has a comedy routine with Jessica and suggests that if all the Jews become Christians, the price of pork will go up, as Jews are forbidden from eating pork. Jessica likes Portia a lot and they chat for a while, they go in for dinner, everything back at Portia's home is really fine. Meanwhile, Act 4, back in Venice, this is the courtroom scene, and it starts with the Duke and Antonio. Shylock enters to make his case. Bassanio calls him cruel, and Shylock answers, quote, I am not bound to please thee with my answers. Antonio is patient and stoic in the face of death. Everyone tries to get Shylock to change his mind, but he won't budge. It looks like all is lost. Shylock is sharpening his knife when, at the last moment, Nerissa, disguised as a clerk, arrives to say that an eminent lawyer wishes to speak in the case. The Duke, surprisingly, allows it. Letters are read out, assorted banter, and enter Portia disguised as a lawyer. Portia appears to side with Shylock initially and the law, but outwits him by saying that he can't spill any blood, and if he takes any more than just a pound of flesh, he's broken the bond and will be liable to be executed and lose all his property. Shylock cannot get his pound of flesh, nor now can he get his money back. But then Portia causes him to lose all his property and could be executed unless the Duke shows him mercy. The Duke agrees to pardon Shylock, who says he'd rather be dead. Finally, Antonio says that Shylock must become a Christian. Bassanio tries to give money to the lawyer, but she, the lawyer, Portia, instead says that she would like the ring that is on Bassanio's finger, the one that Portia gave to him in the previous act. In scene 2, Act 4, Portia and Nerissa are still in disguise, and Gratiano catches them up and gives Portia Bassanio's ring, and Gratiano gives his ring to the clerk, who is Nerissa disguised. Finally, in Act 5, It opens on the garden at Portia's place. Lorenzo and Jessica are feeling good. There's musicians playing music. Portia and Nerissa arrive to take back the house from Lorenzo and Jessica. Enter Bassanio and Gratiano and Antonio. The confusion with the rings is sorted out, and Bassanio and Gratiano learn that it was their wives all along who saved Antonio. And guess what? Portia has a letter that says some of Antonio's ships came in and he's now rich again. Lorenzo and Jessica inherit Shylock's wealth, and everyone agrees that Portia's amazing, and they all live happily ever after. So that's just a short rundown on the story of the Merchant of Venice and what happens in the story in each act. Act 5 is just a reconciliation scene in Portia's garden. Act 4 is basically the courtroom scene with one additional scene after the case has been heard. But basically, that's what happens in The Merchant of Venice. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Shakespeare podcast, and we'll see you next time.